Hey guys, tonight we step into one of the most bizarre episodes ever recorded by the church. And it's not a metaphor. It actually happened. You're about to follow, step by step, the strange, slow, and incredibly awkward events surrounding the day a pope was tried, even after he was already dead. Yes, the corpse had a trial. And no, you probably wouldn't have lasted long in that courtroom, mostly from trying not to laugh or scream. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the distant sound of bells ringing across the city of Rome. But it's not the Rome you know from movies or postcards. The city is still beautiful, yes, with gentle hills and pale stone buildings reflecting the orange morning light. But it is also covered in dust, rumors, and a faint smell of trouble. It is the 9th century, and you are in the capital of an empire that still thinks of itself as an empire. But in practice, it seems more like a confusing series of fiefdoms and broken promises. The popes are religious leaders, sure, but they are also pieces on a political chessboard, and sometimes victims of it. You find yourself walking down a narrow street where the sound of monks chanting mingles with the distant hammering of blacksmiths and the murmur of discussions in whispered Latin. And there is something in the air, something tense, as if Rome is holding its breath. In the distance, the Basilica of St. John Lateran rises, its firm silhouette casting long shadows on the stone pavement. You decide to go closer, perhaps to understand why everyone seems so curious. And when you get there, you realize something strange is going on. The movement in front of the church is not that of devout believers. It is more like a spectacle. A sort of informal audience gathers with mixed expressions of astonishment, humor, and fear. You hear fragments of conversation. It can't be true. They say they're going to bring him in one piece. He's been dead for months. Do you understand that? You try to understand what's happening, but everything they say seems incoherent, surreal, until a monk with tired eyes and a low voice murmurs the answer. The previous pope will be judged, today, with the body present. You blink. What? Do you mean, he repeats as if it were nothing special? Beautiful. The body will be taken to the synod. The trial begins this morning. Yes, you heard right. A trial of a corpse, a dead pope. And apparently, this is just another chapter in the medieval Vatican soap opera. The warm morning breeze seems to warm up a little more after that. And the strangest thing is that no one seems to find it completely out of the ordinary. Perhaps because, at that time, Rome was governed more by the stubbornness of the living than by the peace of the dead. You sit on a stone step. The sun shines from the side, and for the first time that day you think this is going to be strange. You don't know much about the man they called Formosus, but as you sit there in the growing warmth of a Roman morning, someone nearby starts talking. Not to you necessarily, but loud enough for anyone pretending not to listen. Formosus, the man mutters, peeling a fig with his fingernail. He was troubled from the beginning. You inch closer. He begins to tell the story in pieces, the way people do when they assume everyone already knows the basics. But you don't. So you listen. Carefully. Formosus was a bishop from far away, a missionary, once sent to Bulgaria to bring Christianity to the people there, and he did well, too well. The Bulgarian king wanted him to stay and lead the church in that region. Formosus agreed, but Rome said no, that wasn't allowed. Then, for reasons that feel less divine and more political, Formosus fled. Some say he left to escape punishment. Others say he was threatened by rivals. Either way, he was excommunicated, banished from the church for years. And yet, somehow, he came back. Not only came back, but rose all the way to the top. In 891, against the odds, Formosus was elected Pope, Pope Formosus. The name itself means handsome, which seems ironic, considering his story would end with his corpse tied to a chair. As Pope, Formosus didn't exactly promote peace. He had enemies, powerful ones, including a rising noble named Guido of Spoleto and his son Lambert. Formosus didn't want Lambert on the throne of the Holy Roman Empire. He wanted Arnulf, a Frankish king from the north. You start to piece it together. Popes were kingmakers, and kingmakers made enemies. When Formosus invited Arnulf to invade Italy and crown him emperor, that was the final straw for some. Now history gets a little blurry here. Arnulf was crowned. Formosus died not long after. Natural causes, they say, though in Rome even natural deaths raise eyebrows. That should have been the end, but of course it wasn't. Because now, months after Formosus's burial, a new pope sits on the throne, Pope Stephen VI, and he has a bone to pick. Several, actually. Mostly with the man 6 feet under. You lean back against the warm stone wall, trying to process all of this. A man exiled, restored, risen, and then hated, even in death. A pope who played the game too boldly. And a successor, who apparently doesn't believe in letting things go. Some historians still argue whether Formosus was truly guilty of anything. Did he break church law by leaving his post as bishop? Maybe. Did he manipulate imperial politics? Probably. Was any of it unusual for a pope of the time? Not really, but the point wasn't justice. The point was revenge and spectacle. And so here you are, in the middle of Rome, waiting to see what happens when old grudges rise from the grave. Literally. The church bells ring again, deeper this time, slow and deliberate like a countdown. You follow the trickle of people moving toward the Lateran Basilica, slipping through the narrow streets. The air feels heavier now, as if the whole city knows. What's about to happen is both sacred and deeply absurd. You reach the steps and pause. Inside, a trial is about to begin, but not just any trial. This is the Cadaver Synod, and yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. The dead Pope Formosus will be tried in a formal church court. You're ushered in by a monk with sleepy eyes. "Mind the smell," he says, not unkindly. "They had to exhume him 2 days ago." You blink. The basilica is dim, filled with shadows and echoes. The scent of incense tries and fails to cover something sour. You spot priests, cardinals, soldiers, and at the center of it all, raised slightly above the floor on a wooden chair, is the corpse of Pope Formosus. He's dressed in full papal vestments, or at least what remains of them. The robes hang awkwardly, like a costume on a scarecrow. His body slumps to the side, held upright with ropes. The skin has tightened, shriveled. His hands are curled, fingers stiff. And someone has gone to the trouble of placing a triple tiara on his skull, though it sits crookedly. You try not to stare, you fail. Beside the corpse stands Pope Stephen VI, the living one, draped in similar robes, but with an expression that belongs more to a man chewing a lemon than leading a church. The audience is silent. The only sounds are the shifting of feet and the occasional cough echoing off the marble. Then the charges are read. You don't expect them to sound so official. Formosus is accused of violating church law, of abandoning his bishopric in Porto, of conspiring against other popes, of accepting the papacy illegally. You glance again at the corpse, who does not respond. A deacon steps forward. He's been assigned as Formosus's defender. You can't tell if he's horrified or amused. Maybe both. Either way, he has to stand there and pretend this isn't a fever dream. Pope Stephen paces as he shouts. His voice rises and falls, full of fire and fury. He jabs a finger toward the body. "This man," he cries, "defiled the holy office. This man, this corpse, wore the robes of Peter unworthily. It's theater, all of it. But the kind you can't look away from." Some historians argue that Stephen was under pressure from the Spolitan faction, that he needed to denounce Formosus to secure his own position. Others believe it was personal, that Stephen simply hated the man and wanted revenge. One thing is certain, no one in the room is bored. You watch as a monk steps forward with a scroll. He reads the testimony of a bishop from years ago. It's long, dry, filled with names and dates. Your mind drifts, then someone shouts, "Let him speak." You look around, confused. A priest places a hand on the corpse's shoulder and turns to the crowd. We ask the accused to answer. The silence is thick, and then, in a voice so dry it could be dust, the deacon answers for him. "My client pleads not guilty." You stifle a laugh, so does someone in the back row. But Pope Stephen is not amused. He declares that silence is further proof of guilt. The corpse, he says, cannot defend itself because the truth has no defense. It's not logic, it's not justice, it's pure righteous performance, and you're seated in the front row. You sit still, trying not to let your face betray how deeply surreal this all is. Across the hall, a shaft of light cuts through the incense haze, landing right on Formosus's face, or what's left of it. His jaw hangs slightly open, not in surprise, but in that slack way bodies have when they've stopped caring about dignity. If he could speak, you think he might just say, "Really? This is how we're doing it." Pope Stephen continues his tirade. He paces in wide, dramatic arcs like a theater teacher who's taken a monologue way too seriously. He lists each accusation again, slower this time, as if repetition will resurrect the point more effectively than the man in the chair. "You were never meant to be pope," he declares, finger stabbing the air. "You broke canon law. You deceived your brothers. You crowned an emperor who had no right to the title." You glance around the room. A few bishops are nodding solemnly. Others are just staring at the floor. One, near the back, is chewing a fig with the slow detachment of someone who gave up understanding hours ago. But it's not just what Stephen is saying. It's how he's saying it. He's sweating, shaking. He leans so close to the corpse at one point that you wonder if he's about to shout into Formosus's ear or try to hear an answer. Historians still argue whether Stephen was truly in control of himself during this trial. Some suggest he was coerced. Others say he was unwell, emotionally unbalanced, maybe even paranoid. But most agree on this. He was angry. And this trial was therapy, and you admit also impressive in a horrifying, slow-motion kind of way. At one point, a monk approaches and adjusts the corpse slightly. The ropes creak. Formosus slumps further, head bobbing to the side like a puppet whose strings are fraying. The tiara slides off. No one picks it up. You realize something then. This isn't just a trial, it's a punishment. But not of Formosus. Not really. It's a warning to everyone watching. A message. Don't cross the wrong people, even after. You're dead. Pope Stephen ends his speech by holding up a parchment. It's an official decree. He reads it aloud. "We declare all acts of Pope Formosus null and void. His ordinations are invalid. His papacy is erased." You shiver. It's one thing to attack a legacy, but to try and erase it, that's darker, more permanent, like cutting someone's name from the credits of history. Then, the final blow. Stephen points at two deacons. They move forward, slowly, like stagehands unsure of their role in this bizarre production. They begin to strip the corpse. One removes the papal stole. Another unclasps the ceremonial ring from the bony finger. It takes effort. You look away. Piece by piece, the body of Formosus is undressed. Not roughly, almost reverently, which somehow makes it worse. A reverse coronation, an unpapifying. You hear murmurs in the crowd, a few gasps. One person covers their eyes. When it's done, the stripped corpse slumps lower still. Now just a body again. No symbols, no titles. Just a man who once sat in the same chair Stephen now occupies, and that perhaps is the point. The sentence is read aloud. Guilty. All charges, irrevocably. Pope Stephen turns and walks out, robes swirling behind him. He doesn't look back. And Formosus, he's not taken back to the tomb. He's dragged out of the church. Yes, dragged, like a sack of rice, or a piece of theater. Scenery no one wants to put away. You stay seated long after the hall empties, trying to comprehend what you've just seen. Justice? No. Closure? Not even close. But unforgettable? Absolutely. You follow at a distance as the body is hauled down the marble steps of the basilica. It's surreal. The silence, the weight, the way no one dares speak above a whisper. The ropes make soft scraping sounds against the stone. His feet, or what's left of them, bump rhythmically over each stair, no ceremony. No burial hymn, just two tired monks, a few curious onlookers, and the echo of something deeply wrong. Outside, the sun is hot now. Sharp, the kind of sunlight that shows everything. Dust on robes, sweat on brows, decay in the folds of skin, too long denied rest. The body of Pope Formosus is tied to a wooden cart, nothing ornate, just planks and rope, like a bundle of firewood being sent down river. You hear someone murmur, "This is blasphemy," but no one replies. And then they take him home to the Tiber. The river flows lazily, greenish-brown and wide. It smells like summer rot and wet stone. A group of fishermen nearby glance over but say nothing. One just shrugs. Rome, after all, has seen worse. The monks tip the cart. The body hits the water with a flat splash, like wet canvas. No ceremony. No prayer, just a discarded pope now drifting among reeds and river gods. You stand at the bank, stunned. This was the leader of Christendom. This was the Bishop of Rome. And now, he floats like trash. It's then you notice, no one watches for long. They scatter quickly, as if afraid to be associated with this moment, as if guilt might splash, but you stay. You watch the current take him. Not fast, not clean, just away. Historians have debated the purpose of this disposal. Was it to erase Formosus? To pollute the Tiber with his memory? To send a warning across the empire, or was it just rage rendered into logistics? They also argue over what happened next, because the story should end here, but it doesn't. Days, maybe weeks later, a group of fishermen pull something from the river. Not fish, not driftwood. The body, still robed, still intact somehow. Still unmistakable. They drag it to shore and leave it under an olive tree. People begin whispering, saying the river rejected him, that the heavens returned him, that no pope, even a disgraced one, should rest in water. The corpse is collected again, quietly this time, by followers who had stayed hidden. They wash the body, redress it, place it in a simple tomb under a church no one visits anymore. Now the city is quiet again, but you feel it, something shifting under the surface. Because this wasn't justice, and Rome knows it. You wake the next morning to whispers. They're everywhere, in the market, in the cloisters, in the corners of taverns where monks shouldn't be. The body came back, they say, floated upstream. Or maybe it never really left. No one agrees on the details, but everyone agrees on the tone. The river didn't want him. You walk through the streets of Rome, and it's as if the buildings are leaning in, listening. Even the fountains seem quieter, as though trying not to interrupt the story as it spreads. And Pope Stephen, he's not celebrating. At first, he tries to ignore it, pretends the judgment was final, the punishment complete. But something has changed. His sermons are sharper now, less about God and more about loyalty. His face has grown pale. His hands shake when he blesses the crowd. You attend a service. He speaks with fury about order, about obedience, about the danger of false prophets. But everyone in the congregation is thinking about a corpse in a cave. A bishop next to you mutters, "You can't win an argument with a dead man, especially if he won't stay buried." Days pass. Then weeks, and slowly resistance stirs. A group of nobles begins speaking out against Stephen. Not openly, no one's that bold yet. But they remember Formosus. Some even owe their positions to him. And now they see this spectacle for what it was: not justice, but humiliation. A public unburial of dignity. One night a pamphlet appears on the church door. Anonymous, just a few words scratched in uneven ink. "The river knows what you did." Stephen tries to hold on to control. He issues proclamations. He tightens rules. He has anyone who speaks fondly of Formosus dismissed or reassigned. But it's like grasping smoke. The people don't forget. And eventually, the murmurs reach a boiling point. One morning you wake to shouting in the streets. You hurry toward the sound and find a crowd gathered in front of the palace, not rioting, not yet, just present, watching, waiting. Soldiers appear, lining the steps, but they look tired. Some won't meet your eyes. A few even slip away into alleys unnoticed. By midday the gates are breached. No violence, just pressure, just presence. They find Pope Stephen alone in a stone room, staring at the wall. He doesn't resist. He's dragged out not in chains, but by silence. No one cheers, no one spits. It's not vengeance, it's gravity. Historians still debate what happened next. Some say Stephen was imprisoned and later strangled in his cell. Others say he died of despair. A few claim he simply vanished, melted into history like wax in the sun. But one thing is clear: the Cadaver Synod didn't end when the body was thrown in the river. It ended when the people decided it had gone too far. And now in the quiet aftermath, you find yourself back at that riverbank. The water moves slowly again. No bodies, just memory. The river has calmed, but Rome has not. You notice the difference in small things, the way monks speak more softly now, how processions seem shorter, how the bells toll with a little less confidence. It's as if the city is exhaling slowly, after holding its breath for too long, and yet nothing official has been done to reverse what happened. Not yet, but behind thick doors and candle-lit altars, the clergy are meeting, whispering, disagreeing. You find yourself near one such gathering, cloistered within the cool stone walls of a monastery. A young cleric lets you linger, pretending you're polishing something while you listen. The debates are endless. Was it lawful? Was it spiritual? Was it madness? One older bishop pounds the table. A trial for a corpse is no trial at all. Another, younger, responds, but he was dangerous, even dead. There it is again, that fear, that lingering sense that Formosus had not just ruled, but unsettled something sacred, something too big to control. You step outside, into the sunlight, and realize how much this strange affair has changed your understanding of power. It's not just crowns and titles, it's memory, reputation, the stories told after you're gone, and right now those stories are cracking open. Not long after, a new pope is elected, Pope Romanus. You'd think with a name like that, he'd bring clarity, order. But instead he hesitates. Maybe he fears what happened to Stephen, or maybe he just doesn't want to touch the mess. So nothing happens, not really. Formosus stays buried. Stephen remains disgraced. The church tiptoes, but the silence isn't sustainable. Romanus doesn't last long. He's deposed within a few months. You don't even hear a good reason, just rumors. He was weak, he was indecisive. He looked the wrong way at the wrong time. Then comes another pope, Theodore II. Now he's different. He acts quickly, without fanfare. Within days of his election, he declares the Cadaver Synod null and void. He orders the bones of Formosus to be retrieved again from their second resting place and placed back into the Basilica of St. Peter with full honors. You watch the procession from the shadows of a pillar. It's smaller than before, no crowds, no drama, just a few faithful priests lifting a box of relics wrapped in cloth and silence. But something about it feels right. At last, Formosus is returned to peace, to dignity, to stillness. You hear a monk whisper, "May the earth rest softer this time." It's a strange thing watching a legacy be reassembled, not by cheers, not by revenge, but by careful, patient acts, like rethreading a torn robe. Historians often argue about the exact sequence of popes in this chaotic stretch of years. It was a revolving door of short reigns and long shadows. But they agree on one thing. Formosus came back. Not just his body, his reputation. And now, with the sun dipping low over Rome, you walk past the basilica where he now lies. You pause, just for a moment, not to pray, not to judge, just to remember. Because in a city obsessed with power, it turns out that even the dead can rise again. You wake to birdsong this time. Honest, gentle, almost annoyingly beautiful birdsong. The kind that only happens after a storm, or in this case, after one pope tried to erase another, and the universe said, absolutely not. The streets of Rome feel lighter now. Maybe not joyful, but less burdened. You see children playing again in the alleys, chasing each other with wooden sticks. Merchants have reopened their stalls. The basilica bells no longer sound like warnings, but you've learned not to trust the quiet here. Rome, after all, is a place where history recycles itself like laundry, hung too many times. Faded, stretched, familiar. You wander into a shaded courtyard where a group of scribes is working in the open air. Long robes, stained fingers, stacks of parchment drying in the sun. One of them, a man with a quill tucked behind each ear, waves you. Over. We're rewriting the lists, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Of popes, he clarifies. Some say Formosus should be erased. Others say he should be remembered twice. You glance at the scroll on his desk. It's long, crowded, names added, crossed out, squeezed between margins, a visual history of indecision. Was he a saint or a villain, you ask? The man shrugs. Depends on the ink. And there it is, the fragile truth behind all history. It lives in who writes it and who rewrites it. You sit for a while watching as they argue over spelling, debate which titles to include, whisper about what Stephen should be called. Spoiler, not kindly. A younger scribe proposes listing the Cadaver Synod as an unfortunate deviation. Everyone nods. That feels about right. By midday, you find yourself back in the cathedral. Not for ceremony, just for shade. The candles burn quietly. The air smells of beeswax and stone. And there, in the far corner, a small plaque has been placed, above a sealed niche in the wall. No gold, no marble. Just words, Formosus, Bishop, Pope, returned. You sit across from it and let the silence do the talking. Historians continue to dig into this story centuries later, arguing over everything. Did Stephen act alone? Was he mad? Was Formosus guilty? Was the synod a ritual, a vendetta, a political performance? But standing here now, all those questions feel smaller. Because at the end of it, a man was buried 3 times. And every time, it said more about the living than the dead. Outside, the sun flickers on the cobblestones. You stretch, walk out slowly. The city exhales with you, and as you pass a baker setting out warm loaves and a monk scolding pigeons near a fountain, you realize this is how history lives. Not in parchment, not in marble, but in memory past. Down like a whispered joke, and this one's unforgettable. The breeze carries a hint of rosemary today, drifting from some unseen garden over a low wall. You walk through quieter parts of the city now, where history doesn't shout, it hums. There's an old woman selling candles beside a crumbling statue of Constantine. She waves as you pass. Looking for ghosts? She asks, half joking, half serious. In Rome, that's always a fair question. You smile and shake your head. But maybe you are, because the ghost of Formosus still lingers here. Not in some spooky, haunted sense, but in the awkwardness of every church scribe trying to explain what happened. In the way people glance at the Tiber with half-formed thoughts. In the fact that no one can quite agree whether the whole affair was political theater, divine punishment, or a deeply embarrassing misunderstanding. You wander toward the archives, not the grand public ones, but a smaller room tucked behind a cloister. Her young monk lets you in with a knowing look. People always ask about the dead pope, he says. Before even hearing your question, he hands you a thick, leather-bound ledger. The Latin script inside is beautiful, methodical, and full of contradictions. You read an entry from a few years after the synod. Pope Formosus, of uncertain legacy, was restored by papal decree. Let it be recorded, though not celebrated. That's saying something. Another entry decades later. The sins of the dead are known only to God. We judge not bones, but acts. That one sounds like someone trying very hard to move on. Historians today still struggle with the Cadaver Synod because it feels almost satirical, like a medieval joke with too much incense and not enough punchline. But it wasn't a joke to them. It was deadly serious. And strangely ritualistic. You find a passage scribbled in the margin of one page, probably by a bored monk. Perhaps the dead pope laughed when they lifted him. If so, none heard. You close the book. Outside, the light has softened. The streets glow the color of warm bread. You cross a square where children are playing with wooden hoops, and you hear one yell, "I'm the Pope," before another yells back, "No, I'm the dead one." You can't help but laugh, because even if they don't know the full story, the myth remains. You sit by a fountain. Its water gurgles gently like a memory you're not sure you invented. And for the first time, you ask yourself, what if Formosus didn't mind? What if he knew somehow that being judged after death would give him more longevity than any blessing, any sermon, any crown? What if, by being unseated, stripped, and thrown away, he became unforgettable? Some legacies are built on triumph. Others are built on how the world reacts when they try to erase you. And as the stars begin to appear one by one, you lean back against the cool stone wall and let the quiet settle in your bones. You're not just watching history anymore. You're breathing. in its leftovers. By now you've realized Rome never truly sleeps. It just pauses, inhales, rearranges itself. And tonight it's quieter, but not silent. You walk past shuttered shops and half-closed monasteries. A cat darts between barrels. Somewhere someone is singing very softly. Not a hymn. Just something with rhythm and long drifting notes. You pass the gates of a small chapel and peek in. There's no one inside, at least no one living. Just statues, frescoes, the glow of a single oil lamp, and a chair that looks far too ceremonial for such a modest space. You sit, not out of reverence, just to rest. Above you, a mural shows St. Peter handing keys to a long line of popes. Their robes are stylized, faces nearly identical, as if papacy erases individuality. But not Formosus. You imagine painting him at the very end of the line, robes slipping off one shoulder, head tilted in that faintly slumped way. A man who became more visible in death than in life, and then in the stillness you remember something you overheard days ago. History is a mirror that blinks. At first you thought it was nonsense, but now you see what they meant. Formosus was judged by people who feared him, feared his influence, his choices, his memory, and so they tried to undo him. But memory is stubborn, so is a good story. Historians today try to place the Cadaver Synod into categories: legal failure, political vendetta, ecclesiastical absurdity. But none of those terms capture how strange it must have felt to sit in that basilica and watch a corpse, an actual silent, dressed-up corpse, be accused of crimes no living person could quite explain. You picture someone carving the Pope's name into a document, then scratching. Without then writing it again, the ink smudges. The name still remains. You sigh. Maybe you're overthinking it, or maybe not enough. You rise from the chair and begin walking again, this time with no destination in mind. A boy passes you in the street, dragging a stick behind him and humming, a tune with no lyrics. You nod. He nods back. Somewhere the bells begin their slow tolling. Midnight. In the distance you see the silhouette of the Lateran Basilica, dark and imposing. You wonder if its walls remember what they witnessed. You wonder if the marble still holds the echo of Pope Stephen's voice, shouting accusations at silence. But the city doesn't feel haunted. It feels tired, like it's trying to forget something. It knows it never really can. You stop at the edge of the Tiber. The moon hangs low and the water is calm, a black ribbon reflecting light in broken lines. And for a moment, you imagine you see a shape beneath the surface, a ripple, a robe, a crown made of memory, but it's gone before it's there, just the river, still flowing. The next morning, the city smells of baking bread and wet stone. Rain must have come sometime during the night, washing dust from rooftops and soaking into the bones of ancient things. Rome always looks a little softer after the rain, like an old general who finally took off his armor. You wander uphill through narrow lanes, feet slipping slightly on slick cobbles. Eventually you reach a quiet courtyard surrounded by faded frescoes and stone benches, worn smooth by centuries of sitting and sighing. A monk is feeding pigeons nearby, and without even turning, he says, "Looking for the dead Pope?" You blink. "I suppose." He chuckles. "You're not the first. Won't be the last." He tosses more crumbs. You sit. He tells you he was once in charge of copying the records of that infamous year, the year of the Cadaver Synod, the changing popes, the missing scrolls, the debates that nearly unraveled the church. He gestures to his knees. This one cracked from kneeling too long over a page no one wanted to write. You ask what he thinks about it. Really? He gives a long pause, then says, "When the living argue over the dead, it's rarely about the dead. That sits with you. As you walk away, the air feels different. Lighter, maybe. Or just older. You pass by a street vendor selling small figurines carved from olive wood. One of them looks like a bishop. You pick it up. The vendor grins. "Everyone wants the saint," he says. "This one's Formosus," you reply. The man hesitates, then shrugs. "Close enough." You carry it with you, a pocket-sized reminder that memory is never fully accurate, just lovingly incorrect. Later that afternoon, you find yourself inside a small library tucked behind the Vatican walls. A historian is lecturing a group of sleepy novices. She points to a tapestry. This, she says, depicts Pope Formosus in heaven, but we don't know who commissioned it. You squint. The colors are faded, but yes, it's him. The eyes, the chin, the robe slightly too loose on the shoulder. The man who once sat in judgment and then sat in judgment again and then was judged no more. A novice raises a hand. Why did they do it? The historian smiles. Because even in death, some men are inconvenient. The group laughs quietly. You don't, because deep down, you know the truth. They didn't hate Formosus. They feared what he represented. The idea that power once handed out could never be fully taken back. They feared that legacy outruns control, and now, centuries later, he's still here, tucked into frescoes, whispered in footnotes, bobbing. Up in podcast episodes and candlelit tours, the story refuses to sink. It floats, just like him. You begin the day with no plan, which in Rome is often the best plan. Your feet take you north past ivy-covered walls and statues, with noses chipped by centuries of weather and pigeons. You pass an old bakery where the loaves look like bricks and smell like heaven. Hey boy runs past you barefoot laughing and nearly collides with a cart of pears. The city has moved on, but you haven't. You stop at a quiet intersection where two roads meet in the shadow of an aging bell tower. There, affixed to the wall, is a small marble plaque. You almost miss it. The letters are worn but still legible in memoriam formosi. Misjudged, misused, remembered, no date, no insignia. Just that. And yet it's more than most ever get. You sit beneath it for a while, letting the shade settle on your shoulders like a cloak. Somewhere above, a bell tolls noon. Not for morning, just to keep time. It's strange. You've read about wars, empires, revolutions. But this story, this one strange tale of posthumous politics and papal drama, stays with you more than any battlefield. Because it's absurd, because it's human, because it's real. Later, in a cramped antique shop that smells of leather and dust, you find an illustrated manuscript tucked between volumes on Roman architecture. The page it's open to shows a cartoonish scene. A pope on a throne, clearly a corpse, slumped and surrounded by shouting bishops. One is pointing, another appears to be weeping. A third is mid-snack. You laugh, you can't help it. And the shopkeeper leans in. Ah, the trial of the dead. A classic. You ask how many versions of the tale exist. Too many, he says. And they all disagree. He wraps the book for you in brown paper. As you leave, he adds, be careful. Stories like this have a way of sticking to your skin. He's not wrong. That night you find yourself back at the Tiber, under a moon that looks like it's been bitten. The water moves slowly, and you think about legacies again, how some are carved in stone, while others drift quietly, waiting to be rediscovered. Somewhere a boat slips past, oars dipping rhythmically. The sound fades, and in the hush that follows you imagine the voice of Formosus himself, not bitter, not vengeful, just tired. Tired of being rewritten, tired of being rearranged, tired of floating, and you whisper to no one, I remember you. Because maybe, just maybe, that's what matters in the end. You dream of chairs, not just any chairs, thrones, big ones. Golden, wooden, marble, some too tall to climb without help, others so cracked they look like they'd collapse under a heavy breath. In the dream, the chairs are all empty. When you wake, it's just before dawn. The city isn't quiet, not exactly, but it's softer. No voices yet. Just wind through alleyways, the creak of old shutters, and the rustle of laundry someone forgot to take in. You step outside and stretch. Today feels like a day for visiting ghosts. You take a different route, one you haven't walked before, through neighborhoods where ivy climbs the walls like gossip, and doorways are low enough to make even you stoop. You pass a statue missing both arms and its entire face, but the plaque is intact. It reads, "To those who ruled and were forgotten." You smile. Eventually, you find yourself at a small chapel tucked behind a vineyard. You weren't looking for it, but it feels like it was waiting. The door is open. Inside, there's no altar, Just a stone floor and 4 wooden benches. A single window lets in enough light to keep the dust dancing. And in the center of the room, resting on a block of stone, is something simple. A ring. Papal. Heavy. Cracked. You don't touch it. A friar appears as if from the wall itself. He nods politely, then sits beside you. For a long while, neither of you speaks. Then finally he says, "Do you know how many popes there have been?" You shake your head. "Too many," he says, "but only one was judged while dead." You'd say, both smile at the absurdity of it. Then he adds, "And still people come to ask about him." It's true. Formosus never performed miracles. He never launched a crusade. He never commissioned a grand cathedral or wrote a doctrine that changed the world. But he was remembered, not because of what he did while alive, but because of what was done to him after. You ask the friar if he thinks Formosus deserved what happened. He closes his eyes. Deserved is a word for the living. Another pause. Then he opens a drawer and hands you a folded piece of cloth. Inside it, embroidered in fading thread, are the words Vox post mortem. A voice after death. You thank him. He nods once. No ceremony. You leave the chapel and continue walking through a city that holds its contradictions like old coins in a forgotten purse, worn, real, and full of quiet worth. The sun rises slowly, casting gold onto the domes and towers, the same way it did when Formosus was still breathing, and somewhere deep in the archives, a page with his name curls slightly at the edges, not from fire, not from flood, but from time. Even paper gets tired, but stories, they just keep retelling themselves. By now you know your way around this version of Rome. The Rome that lives not in tourist maps or postcards, but in footnotes and candlelit corners. The Rome where stories are older than certainty and truth tends to wear a disguise. You return to the Lateran one last time, not for spectacle, not for answers, just to sit. The basilica is quieter than usual. Someone is sweeping in the far aisle. A child whispers a question to her father, who hushes her with a hand on her shoulder. A tour group shuffles past without noticing you. You settle near a column and let your thoughts stretch out like limbs in the sun. What did it mean, this trial? What kind of legacy begins with robes and ends in ropes? You close your eyes and imagine the courtroom again. Not as it was, but as it could have been. Silent, respectful. Absurd in its reverence for the rules even while breaking the spirit. You picture Formosus seated there, not as a corpse, but as a man, confused maybe, or just resigned. You wonder if he would have laughed, or sighed, or stood. Would he have defended himself, or would he have simply looked past them all, eyes focused on something bigger than revenge? A priest walks by, notices you, and stops. "Are you looking for someone?" he asks. You smile. "No, just listening." He nods, as if that's the most reasonable thing you could say. And maybe it is. Because stories like this one don't offer closure. They don't end with neat lines or moral lessons. They just spiral outward, touching new minds, rewriting themselves with each retelling. Some say the Cadaver Synod was Rome at its worst. Theatrical, vindictive, macabre. Others say it was Rome at its most honest. You've come to believe both. Can be true. And somewhere deep inside, you know this story will stay with you. Not for the scandal, not for the strangeness, but for the reminder that power fears memory. And memory, once awakened, cannot be drowned. You rise, dust yourself off. The echo of your steps fades into the stone like another forgotten sentence in a long, endless scroll. Outside, the sky is clear, the Tiber glinting like a blade that's finally found its sheath. And as the bells toll softly behind you, you whisper the name once more, not as a punchline, not as a warning, but as a thread in the fabric of a city that remembers everything, Formosus. Evening again. It always returns gently in Rome, not as an ending, but as a soft edit. Shadows stretch over archways, lanterns begin to flicker alive, and the sound of sandals over stone feels like punctuation after a long paragraph. You take one last walk before sleep, not for any particular reason, just to move, to let your thoughts settle. There's a breeze tonight, It carries the scent of wax, citrus, and old books. You pass a group of students sitting in a circle outside a small chapel. One of them is reading aloud from a thin volume, words floating into the air like dandelion seeds. You catch just one. Sentence: in the trial of the dead, it is the living who are judged. You keep walking. Soon you find yourself on a hill overlooking the river, the Tiber, quiet and unbothered, as if centuries of scandal have simply passed along its surface like leaves. You sit, you watch, and in the stillness, you begin to feel. It all makes sense. The Cadaver Synod wasn't about law, or legacy, or even revenge. It was about fear. Fear of what happens when power shifts. Fear of what memory might preserve. Fear that someone, even in death, might remain louder than the throne they once left behind. Formosus didn't choose to be remembered this way, but he was, and still is. He became a story that couldn't be buried. He became a cautionary tale that reversed on its teller. He became a chapter no one expected, but everyone kept rereading. You think about Stephen 6:6 shouting into the silence, trying to erase something with ritual and robes, trying to scream over history instead of listening to it, and you think about how that worked out. Not well, because history, real history, listens better than it speaks. It remembers the absurd. It saves the inconvenient. It lifts up what people try hardest to drag down. You sigh. The breeze has cooled now. The moon is bright. And Rome, despite everything, feels peaceful. Somewhere below, in a quiet tomb or dusty wall, the remains of Formosus. Rest at last, no robes, no chair, no verdict hanging above him, just stillness. And maybe, Kate, just maybe, I'm the faintest whisper of a smile. You wake before the bells today. Before the sun warms the rooftops, before the markets open, before even the monks begin their slow shuffle down the stone halls for morning prayer. The world is still blue, soft, suspended. You lie there for a moment longer, staring at the wooden beam above your head. It creaks slightly, not because of you, but because it always does. Like it's remembering something. You wonder how old it is, who else has woken beneath it, what other names it's overheard. Your feet find the floor, cool, dusty, familiar. Now there's a pitcher of water by the door, left by someone you'll never see. It tastes of clay and patience. You drink, stretch, pull on your sandals, and step outside into the breath of early Rome. This morning isn't about cathedrals or crypts or papal rings. It's about letting what you've seen begin to settle. Not like sediment, but like roots. You take a turn down a street you've never noticed before, one of those narrow lanes that seems to exist only in liminal hours. The buildings lean inward like they're whispering secrets to each other. Clotheslines hang above you like prayer flags. A cat darts across your path and vanishes into a crack in the wall. You keep walking. Rome, at this hour, feels unclaimed. Not owned by history or tourists or politics, just held gently by time. Eventually, you find yourself in a courtyard you've never seen, though it feels impossibly familiar. Vines creep over the stone walls. A broken sundial casts no shadow. There's a fountain that no longer flows, its basin filled with petals and dust. You sit. There's a quiet here that doesn't ask questions, doesn't retell the story of the synod, doesn't echo with judgments or laughter, just breathes with you, and it's in this moment, in the gentle stillness, in the lack of anything grand or symbolic, that you begin to understand what memory really is. Not marble, not monuments, not even written words, but presence. The act of returning, again and again, to something that once mattered. Even if you no longer know exactly why, you think about how Formosus must have felt during his final days. Not the trial, not the river, just the slow unraveling of breath. The sense of being watched, remembered, misunderstood, maybe even forgiven. And maybe he didn't need statues or sainthood. Maybe the true legacy is this, that centuries later, someone like you would sit quietly beneath ivy and sky, thinking not of crowns or curses, but of silence and stillness, and the dignity of being remembered without being used. The breeze shifts, a few leaves fall from the trees above you, spiraling lazily. You breathe in deeply, letting the quiet fill every part of you. There are no bells, now, no voices, just the sound of your own heartbeat, steady and slow. And in this simple morning, and with nothing in your hands and everything in your chest, you feel a kind of peace that no verdict could ever give. You don't have a destination today. There's no agenda, no list, no ancient chapel to track down or forgotten tomb to visit. Just the soft pull of curiosity and the streets of Rome unfolding in front of you like a story you've read before, but only once and too long ago to remember all the details. You wander along the quieter roads, away from the basilicas and monuments. Here Rome breathes a little differently. It exhales through chipped fountains and cracked windows, through shuttered shops and the worn faces of statues whose names no one speaks aloud anymore. That's when you see it, a crooked little shop, tucked between two larger buildings, almost swallowed by ivy and old stone. Its windows are so dusty they reflect more than they reveal. Hanging above the door is a wooden sign, hand-carved but faded beyond recognition. You push the door open, and it doesn't creak in its size. Inside, the air smells of paper, wax, and dried lavender. The shelves are cluttered but not messy. Every item feels placed, as if it were left there by someone who didn't want to let go but finally had to. You take slow steps through the aisles, a cracked goblet, a bundle of ancient keys with no locks, a child's wooden horse missing one wheel, a chipped mosaic tile the size of your palm, and then you see it. A papal ring, not gold, not jeweled, just iron, dark, worn, honest. It's heavier than it looks and colder too. You turn it in your fingers, expecting a name, a crest, anything to explain it. But it's smooth, blank, like it's tired of being asked to explain itself. The shopkeeper appears behind the counter without a sound, an old man with eyes that seem both distant and deeply amused. "Looking for anything?" he asks. "Not really," you answer. "Good," he says, nodding. "That's the best way to find something." You hold up the ring. "Formosus," you ask. He shrugs. "Could be, or maybe just someone who was remembered wrong." You smile because somehow that feels more honest than a name. He wraps it in a square of cloth and ties it with string. "It's not worth much," he says, "but sometimes weight is more important than price." You leave the shop holding the bundle and walk without knowing where you're headed. The ring presses against your palm through the fabric. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind. You find a bench beneath a tree and sit. The street is quiet. The shadows are long. You unwrap the cloth slowly, lay the ring on your knee, and stare at it. It's not a relic, not an artifact. It's something more ordinary than that, and maybe that's why it feels sacred. Because what is history if not ordinary things that someone bothered to carry? You think about how many objects were lost during Formosus's life. Letters burned, decrees undone, vestments stripped away, bodies buried, then exhumed, then buried again. And yet here you are, centuries later, with a replica of something someone once wore to say, "I was chosen, I belonged." Not to rule, not to dominate, just to serve something larger than themselves. You turn the ring again in your fingers. Not all symbols are grand. Some are quiet, some just need to be held for a while. Eventually you slip it onto your thumb, not because it fits, but because it feels like it should be worn, even briefly. You sit there until the light changes and the leaves begin to stir, with the promise of evening. And as you rise, the weight of the ring still with you, you realize you're not carrying Formosus's story. You're letting it carry you. You've walked enough, not in the way your feet would notice. They're used to the rhythm by now, but in that deeper way, the one behind your ribs, where memory becomes muscle and story becomes silence. Tonight, you walk not to discover, but to return. You cross familiar stones, past quiet fountains that once seemed ancient and now feel like old friends. The city is cooling. A lavender dusk is folding itself over roofs and towers, softening every edge. And then you see it again. The bridge. Not grand, not famous, just there. You step onto it slowly, hand grazing the stone railing, the river below gliding with the indifference of time. The Tiber doesn't hurry, it doesn't judge, it just carries, and it has carried so much. Water, ash, wine, bones, Formosus, maybe. You reach the middle of the bridge and stop. Beneath you, the river reflects a sky that can't decide whether to hold on to blue or surrender to gold. It flickers, shimmers, distorts like memory, like legacy. You lean over the edge and close your eyes. You don't need to see anymore. You already know. You know that Formosus wasn't the first to be condemned unfairly, or the last. You know that power, when afraid, behaves like a frightened animal, snarling, cornered, absurd. You know that silence speaks loudest when it's dressed in ritual and rope. And you know, perhaps more than anything, that the stories which survive are not always the clean ones. Sometimes they float, half decayed, half true, half denied, like a body drifting down a river that refuses to let go. A soft wind brushes your cheek, and then you hear it. Laughter. Not mocking. Not cruel, just light. You glance to your right. A group of children is running past, waving feathers, and long ones, colorful, tied to sticks like parade banners. One of them looks at you and grins. "Look," she shouts. "I'm the Pope." You can't help it. You laugh, loudly, from the chest. And in that instant, you realize what no document, no fresco, no encyclical ever quite captured. Formosus didn't lose. Because here you are, still remembering him, still walking his story, still saying his name, not out of devotion, not out of duty, but out of something quieter, recognition. You lean back against the stone and let the moment hold you. The lamps along the bridge flicker to life, one by one, as the sun dips fully below the rooftops. Rome sighs. You feel it in the wind, in the hush, in the way even the birds seem to rest on shorter wings. You slip your hand into your pocket and feel the weight of the ring, still there, still warm from your skin, and you smile, because you finally understand. You didn't come here for answers. You came here to be part of the echo, to walk beside the memory instead of dissecting it, to leave footprints beside the forgotten. And now, as you turn to leave the bridge, you walk not away from the story, but into the soft space where stories live once they've been told well enough to sleep. You don't look back, not because you're finished with the story, but because the story is finished with you. It's settled, rooted, folded into the quiet corners of your mind, where it can rest now. You walk slowly, letting the rhythm of your steps soften. There's no need to hurry. Nothing else is waiting, only the night, only sleep. The city dims around you, lamp by lamp, window by window, breath by breath. Your body begins to sink gently into stillness, the kind of stillness that only comes when something complicated has been carried long enough. You feel the weight of the ring in your pocket, small and steady, like a heartbeat. You won't wear it tomorrow. You won't explain it to anyone. But you'll keep it, quietly, like a secret between you and history. As you lie down, wherever you are, in bed, on a couch, wrapped in blankets or silence, let everything fall away now. Let the past fall silent. Let the thoughts settle like dusk over ancient rooftops. Let your breath match the slow rhythm of the river, in and out. You've followed the dead through cathedrals, trials, rivers, and rumors. And now, finally, you've reached what they never did. Peace. There's nothing left to figure out. Nothing left to fix. Nothing left to remember right now. Just sleep. Let the world continue spinning without you for a while. The story will wait. And in this quiet place between thought and dream, you are safe, you are still, and you are home.